So this tournament played an 8-year-old in the first round. I played a grandmaster in the second round. And then in the third round, I got paired with a 12-year-old wearing one of those US chess jackets because they're on the team, who knew more theory than I ever have in my life. And that was what I had to deal with in this game. I had the white pieces, but it's like, what do you want from me? You know what I mean? You mean to just win? You mean to just win when I can't? So usually, when I'm playing a kid, the question of d4 or e4 is answered by, well, how old are they? And like 12 years old is kind of like right on the edge where, yeah, they're still a kid, but they might be just better than me, not just tactically, but just in every way. And still, I decided to play d4 just because, I don't know. I've gotten really sick of the Catalan lately. Every single board at this tournament was a Catalan. Like, it felt like a thematic. And I'm tired of it, and I don't really want to do it anymore because it's cool now. But I went with d4, and then my worst nightmare started. So she played all of these moves completely instantly until move, like, I don't know, 15. Every move was just automatic completely, which told me that she knew the theory. And unfortunately, the line that she chose is kind of the most drawn line possible, or at least in my experience. I've had games like this. I mean, okay, this is also what I play with black. So the point of this is, okay, let me start from the beginning. We've talked about this before. Once g3 is played, it's established that e3 will not be played. So taking on c4 is instantly more reasonable. The second thing that she's doing is she's attacking my center with a side pawn, but in a way that she's delaying moving her kingside bishop until I actually take here. Because, for example, if I were to castle and she were to play bishop e7, after I take, she has to spend another move taking the pawn, which is common in like 10,000 openings, but that is why she plays knight c6 to force matters. There's only one other line here that I'm aware of, which is queen a4, which maybe this is, instead of just giving up the Catalan entirely, I should try to learn this first. That British man played this against me at Mid-America last year. Man, that was a year ago. And I got destroyed. So I think that queen a4 is something I should look into. However, I had no idea, like, really what... I know that bishop d7 happens and queen takes c4 and b5, and I know that queen d3 and queen c3 are both moves, but I didn't understand a single nuance or how to play the position, and I just felt like if she knew theory in the one line, she would know both, and so I would be completely outmatched in not only opening theory, but understanding of the ideas. So I didn't think it was even possible to just try something new, because of how confidently and instantly she was playing. So I just took on c5, queen takes d1, and I've had a game that went exactly like this. This is all still like really common theory, bishop e7. I played a game like this at the Denver Chess Club like several years ago against someone who at the time I think was like 1800, and I was over 2000 back then. And I remember I was just trying to win for hours and hours, and I was the last game going, playing on my 10-second delay, and I just could not win, because this is, it just, it's miserable for black, but if you play well, then, you know, you can kind of just defend, and it ends up being a draw. And so I'm like traumatized from this, that like, I still in my head, even though we're like nearing the same rating at this point, in my head, I'm still like, oh, I have to beat 1900s, I have to beat them, I can't draw them, which is incorrect. It's probably some ego problem that I have. But I'm just like pissed off because I know that I'm gonna have to grind forever to get like a tiny advantage, and even getting the tiny advantage, it might not be enough to win. So this shit sucks. So a little explanation of what happened here. Of course, I'm going to win back the c4 pawn no matter what, because it's just hard to defend in any useful way. Like b5 is pretty suicidal, and there is no other piece that can sufficiently defend the c4 pawn. So black always opts to play c3 and destroy the pawn structure and give sort of a target on the c file for them. I've also had this position with black against FIDE Master, and I won that. So you have to understand that this is not a bad line for black. and I wanted to kill myself. Anyways, castle is knight b3, and this is the last like subtle mistake black can make in the opening is bishop e7 is the only reasonable move. Bishop b6 is just not where the bishop wants to be. Like bishop e7 seems more passive, but it's just kind of in the way because eventually you're going to want to loosen this weakness. Like usually you play, thank you for the raid 64 squares live. Where does the c8 bishop go? Yes, so bishop b6 actually ruins this bishop's development. Normally what they're going to want to do is play bishop e7, bishop d7 to defend the knight so they can play b6 and just completely vacate every piece from the light square diagonal. And if they can do all that, then there's no more pressure. It's kind of hard to do, but if they can do it, there's no pressure. But once you play bishop b6, probably I'll put a rook on b1 and push one of my pawns up to try to disrupt things a little bit. And that's like the last place that would tell me if she actually knew what she was doing or not, and she did. So bishop e7, and from here, like, I played knight fd4, which is the most common move. The FIDE master played c4 and like bishop b2 stuff against me, but I believe I've played knight b to d4 as well, and my opponent thought that this was the correct move, but I don't really think that's true. This makes far more sense to me because immediately it's creating the most pressure possible and discouraging any sort of evacuation from the diagonal here. So bishop d7 just because I made a threat, and rook d1, putting something here, and like these pieces are all like semi-loose. And that's why it's sort of uncomfortable for black for a while, but as soon as you solve it up, it's just equal, and then I can't do anything. And I certainly tried my hardest, but all right, rook f to d8, pretty simple moves. And bishop takes f6 is apparently the most common move here, and maybe the best move. I convinced myself in the game that I had done so prematurely, but oftentimes in the Catalan, and when I discovered this, it surprised me, but you can actually give up the dark squared bishop kind of unprompted, just because this knight is actually really annoying to deal with, so for a few reasons. Number one, it makes it easier to block that diagonal. And here, for example, bishop takes f6 is already like a pretty terrible move, I think, because like knight c5 comes. And now this is really you're starting to see the pressure and why we have to play b6 eventually after like rook c8 and defending everything. Because if the b pawn moves, then the knight can be easily undermined with knight takes d7, and on top of that, of course, if b6, this is hanging, but just speaking hypothetically here. In fact, even if you defend the pawn here, I can probably take it, knight takes b7 takes, and knight takes c6. Although I do have to worry about the c3 pawn at the end. I didn't calculate very hard about this, I just kind of understood that the c5 square would be worth giving up the bishop pair, and it is. So, she has to play g takes f6. That is the only reasonable move, which I knew, but I was like hoping she wouldn't know that, but she did. And even though black's pawn structure is bad, it's still pretty hard for me to actually break through here. And I do my best. But I think here what I should do is play knight takes c6 and trade everything and just argue that the pawn structure is that much more favorable for me. But I didn't do that because, again, like, let's turn on the engine for a second because I'm curious. Yeah, like, at best, I'm slightly better in this endgame, but also she has a bishop, and I don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm bad at chess. So, I mean, this was one option. I'm not saying this is bad. This is maybe better than what I did, but it's just, this sort of thing is just discouraging to me, and because I've experienced it so many times, I'm just kind of sick of it, and then being in a bad mood makes you play worse. So I went for c4, and the idea behind this move is I'm going all in on the weak dark squares, specifically d6. I want to play the move c5 and put a horsey on the d6 square, or maybe even double up the rooks if the knight gets captured, and make this bishop look really dumb. Because right now it's hard for the bishop to ever get out without pushing this pawn or getting out this way. Yes, I returned to Over the Board Stephen Willie, and let me tell you, we are nearing our floor rapidly, playing these kiddos. Computer says this move is not great, and I think it's just because if black defends well, it's just like very equal. And my one chance to play for an advantage, again, was to just trade everything here and play with the better pawn structure, but knight versus bishop. I generally tend to avoid those sort of endgames when there's pawns on both sides of the board. Like, it seems stressful. Yeah. So I thought c4 was practically a really good try. But rook a to c8, of course, defending this threat. So now I don't really even have that option anymore to destroy the pawn structure. And the game from here seems pretty, like, straightforward. So knight b5, hopping into d6 with a fork. So at least I'm getting I'm not getting the bishop pair back, but I'm taking it away from my opponent, so she doesn't get to keep it, and I got to damage the pawn structure. And I don't think there's, like, a fantastic way to stop my knight from coming to d6. One option would be knight to e5, which is interesting, which looks kind of bad at first because both of these pawns are hanging, but also c4 is hanging, which is what's defending everything here, and I think that breaking out here would be worth whatever mayhem ensues. Because, like, if I played bishop takes, rook takes c4, so I didn't even win a tempo. Why not bishop to e8? I think my opponent played that. No, she didn't. Bishop e8 is also fine, but then I just continue with the plan. I play c5 and I put the knight here. Yeah, that is the idea. And it's, you know, it's fine. Her pieces look bad. They're not bad enough that I can just win. But I think that if you let people have really ugly looking pieces for a long time, they just kind of break down sometimes. It's not fun to have ugly pieces. But yeah, I would have just gone with c5 and just kind of went with the vibes of it all. But she went a6, which I thought was, like, pretty surprising. I didn't think this was a very good move because it pushes my knight to the square that it wants to be on in the first place, and it further weakens the dark squares, and it seems like it's going to keep this pawn, like, fixed on the weak b7 square. But after knight d6, bishop takes d6, rook takes d6, bishop e8, it's just, like, yeah, I mean, I prefer white, but how am I supposed to win this? Like, okay, I go rook d1. Yeah, c5, well, so c5 here, like, okay, like, excuse me for playing ugly moves, but the position calls for it. Like, knight d8. Listen, I do have a silly pawn now, and maybe, again, I'm not arguing that what I did was good. It's just frustrating, and if she plays well, she can defend in any of these. Like, it's equal, no matter what. And yes, this is ugly, but also, like, the rook gets out, then, I don't know, like, maybe I pop this boy over at some point. Maybe I go here at some point, take back with the rook even, and then go over here or something. I don't know. That's a bad example, but something like that might be okay. Anyways, c5 seemed equally fine to rook d1 to me. They seemed similar. So rook takes d6, rook takes d6, and rook c7. So rook d1, d7? Huh? Rook d1. Okay, well, I'm gonna, like, not allow you to kill me. And then if you play d7, then the pawn is overextended. Like, black can't wiggle their way out of this easily. It's one of those just ugly defending positions where you're frustrated because you feel like you should be not even winning, but better, and you're just not. Anyways. Takes, rook c7 is fine. It's not, like, a move I would play, but it makes sense. Maybe this is coming next. Probably. Something like that. You can't play two moves in a row. That is true. So c5, and I'm just gonna pretend that everything's fine here. The really big issue is that I would love to add multiple attackers to the b-pawn, but, like, the knight has to defend this pawn if this knight isn't here, and if this knight is here, then the knight can't pop in. So this move is never possible. The rook is, like, one of my only assets is that I have the d-file. Temporarily. And, you know, I don't know. King f8. Very normal. Easy moves. And I did something kind of weird here. Keep in mind, I'm, like, in my head, I'm, like, playing for a win. Like, I do not want to draw. What are some ways we can kind of make a mess of things or I don't know, try to overwork our opponent? Any ideas are welcome. All right, I'll point out the suggestions. a3 is a suggestion, f4 is a suggestion, h4 is a suggestion. I'm not sure the point behind a3, but f4 and h4 both have very specific purposes to them in my mind, and were both moves I considered during the game. I'm not sure why they're being suggested here. If anyone can tell me their reasoning, that would be great. Knight d4 looks bad. but I don't know. I agree, it does look bad. I don't want to let him out, you know, like, this is just like at best a fancy trade, but now I don't have any of my so-called pressure, or at least my opponent doesn't feel quite as cramped. f4 gets a square for the king and has the idea of f5. Okay. So yes, if I can explain the pawn moves on the king side in an even more obscure way, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that the king is leaving the king side. The queen side, not in like a really concrete way that I've had before in the Catalan, where I've just like, you know, you win on one side of the board, then the other, and then the middle type thing. I would say I'm doing a lot better than my opponent on the queen side, and that's something, but it's not like terrible for my opponent. I gotta get my hand out of the camera. But if I can, now that I have like a slight advantage on the queen side, black is leaving the king side, perhaps I can create, an advantage on the king side as well. Can I help you?
Streaming or recording?
Both?
Anyways, guess who just got approved for the Chase Sapphire Preferred? 100,000 bonus points.
What does that mean? It's like credit card stuff?
Travel. Yeah.
Okay. Do you need another credit card?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's nice. So sorry about that. Yeah, probably. Probably has like 20 leather jackets, all from different designers and different styles that are all slightly different, but he thinks that they look very different. Anyways, it's a collection. What was I saying? Yeah, so I have an advantage on the queen side. I want to now have an advantage on the king side as well, and have these small things add up over time. And this seems like the right time, right now, when black has played king f8 and is going to the center to play on the queen side, because there's nothing over here. The bishop's like locked out. This is like a lone pawn. I wish I had stockfish. No, I wanted to play bishop e4 and attack this pawn, but then she just shuts me out, right? And so what someone mentioned in the chat, playing f4, f5, seems really, really smart, because after f4, okay, say nothing happens, and I play f5, like taking this looks awful. The computer says it's still zeros, but it feels like, come on, just like look at it, you know what I mean? But then I would get frustrated because, okay, like self-service principle of pawns, if f4 is a good move for white, it's a good move for black. Or f5 is a good move for white, it's a good move for black. f5 is a good move in general. So if black plays f5, it's like, what the hell do I do now? e4 now? I mean, I'm sure I had a reason why I didn't like this. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just an idiot. Let me think. 97? You think it was 97? I don't think so. Because I'm just gonna take. Takes an f5 again, but then e6 hangs. So clearly it's... Or surely, I shouldn't say clearly, surely it's not that. Okay, well, for argument's sake, I'm not exactly sure what exactly I was thinking, but just to be argumentative. Okay, what about just h6, and now there's no doubled pawns and I lost my e-pawn? Like, is that good for me? Did I benefit from this? I can still play for f5, maybe f5, and she can just take and king g7, and it's fine, maybe? What? Oh, I guess you mean take and king g7. That's what you mean, probably. Sure, pick a reason. Every single line that we've looked at in every subline has all been equal. So none of this really matters. In a position like this, it's all human speculation, and like, it's all human. We're trying to play in a human way. Does that make sense? Like, it's gonna be equal no matter what, but I gotta play in a way that, like, does something psychologically. Anyway, I overthought this position. I want to know how long I spent here, actually, because I made kind of a weird move, but an interesting one. All right, I spent like 15 to 18 minutes here. Cosmo, shut up. So I didn't play f4. I think other moves, I think I also vaguely liked h4. Anyways, someone asks in the chat, why can't you just go into the center? Why can't you just king f1 and chill? And if I play king f1, then she goes f5. And then I don't ever get to do anything fun. So all that being said, we can kind of guess what I did. I played the move g4. Oops. I played the move g4, which is fine. And the idea is that now if you go f5, I will take you, and I will still have two center pawns. And I'm, like, doing just fine. It's still equal. But like, how is this equal? Doesn't it look awful for black? You know what I mean? Anyways, that was the idea. She then plays the move king to e7, which makes sense. And I go bishop e4, which she responds h6, of course. And the question is, what now? Did I make it any improvements? What I would love is to have all this truly be locked up and I just bring my king over. But I don't think that feels very slow and bad and stupid. This seems okay. I went f4. I think at this point, yeah, we're both down to about 40 minutes. I spent 3 minutes on f4. I don't know. What do you want from me? You want me to win this position? I'm doing my best. She goes a5, which shocked the hell out of me. My question to you, chat, is a5 the best move or a blunder? And I want you to really calculate here. I'm looking at you, Stephen Willie. There are things happening. Blunder, but I have not calculated anything. Let's run a poll here. No one look at the computer, because that's stupid. Is that how you spell brilliant? Seems like it hangs a pawn to me. Does it? That's what it seemed like to me. Well, as we all know, all rook endgames are drawn, regardless of pawn count. So probably. Takes knight. Oh, no. Takes knight, takes up a pawn. Okay. Well, it's a little more complicated than that, unfortunately. It's 50-50 with 1 vote for blunder and 1 vote for brilliant. I'm 3-digit elo, bruh. What you want from me? 2 people voted for blunder and 1 did brilliant. Bishop c6, knight a5, bishop d5, tapping knight. Take here. You know, I'm actually really glad you bring that up. I want you to remember this. I like this thought. I want you to hold on to it. And I need you to really understand this concept that when a knight is on the edge of the board and there's a bishop 2 squares away, then the knight is trapped. Of course the knight is not trapped here because knight b3 is legal. But this is quite good. Now, there's a lot going on here. So first, let me just say, look at this asshole. Are you an asshole? Do you like hamburger? Are you interested in learning chess? Cosmo, is a5 a blunder or is it brilliant? Okay, there's a lot of lines here. I don't remember any of them, and for some reason I make no notes, but they're here. So, okay, my first thought, of course, is to look at bishop takes c6 and knight takes a5. Now, let's look at that first because it's the most, obvious thing. And then, of course, bishop d5. Kind of trapping the knight, making the knight look dumb, but more so it's eyeing the c-pawn and trying to trap the rook up in here. There is knight b3, to which black would, if they want to win the c-pawn, black would take, and then rook b6, and then, say, rook c7. This position looked very good to me, but not winning. And this was one of the main lines I liked. However, something I noticed in my calculations was that if I play knight b3, black can simply play rook takes c5. And if I take, king takes, and I'm losing, and rook takes e6, f takes e6, here is something, for some reason, I didn't consider. Maybe I thought, ooh, no, not that. Maybe I thought this, and surely this is a draw, maybe? I don't know what I was thinking. In hindsight, I should have just gone for this. I think I was, very, very certain I was going to play into this line, and I was very happy with this. And then at the last second, I saw rook takes c5 here, and I think I had already spent, 9 minutes, and I was just like, all right, or 8 minutes, and I gotta find something else. And then, otherwise, this move is going to be pretty annoying. My only other option would be to play a4, which looks like long-term would not be ideal for me, because, first of all, knight d8 right away is causing some issues. Yeah, it looked winnable, but you have to understand that I suck. And I did eventually decide to go for this. I think maybe I played all this, and only here did I see that after knight b3, rook takes c5, and then I just, discounted the whole thing and forgot to look for a single follow-up, which is pretty dumb. And I ended up playing this rook b6 move, which is just why did I do that? So if bishop takes, the rook's hanging, so for now my pawn's tactically defended, but of course there's a checky-wecky and then takes. I feel there's no shot I didn't see that, right? Why would I have gone for this? It feels self-punishing in a way, but maybe it's not, because it doesn't make any logical sense. If I was afraid of one line looking too equal, then going for a line that I looked slightly worse, I don't know, bottom left? Oh, you're talking to that guy. But at this point I'm just madge, and I'm all right, whatever, I'm gonna go after this. So I go rook b5, and I'm I know that this is happening, but I don't really care. I want to win this pawn. And there's nothing I can do about it. Just nothing I can do. I should play rook c5 or something. And then I play rook h5. Chat, what did I miss? I'm down to 25 minutes. My opponent has 40. Trying to avoid those zeros. Yeah, might as well be slightly worse. It's better than being equal, right, guys? Yes. Instead of this move, which is what I expected, bishop d5 and my life is over. And what do we remember, class, from earlier in the lecture? When a knight is 2 squares away from a bishop on the edge of the board, it is trapped. Except now I don't have an a-pawn, and I'm losing. I didn't play knight a5. I went for this, because I was like, I think I was just mad, and I just played all the rest of the moves instantly. I was not in good form psychologically for this tournament whatsoever. Like, all these moves I was just rage playing. They don't really make much sense to look at. And of course she converted pretty flawlessly. But if you think about, like, exactly what it is that I did wrong in this game, I think it was, like, mostly psychological issues that pushed me to make mistakes because I was beating myself up internally and not being objective whatsoever. I honestly thought that where it started to go wrong was my g4 move, but looking back it was still equal and g4 is actually a good move. These are all... Bishop takes c6 is best, this is best. I have to go with the initial thing and just look half a ply ahead. I mean, missing rook e6 at my level is I didn't look at this. Missing this at my level is crazy, especially for the amount of tactics that I do. Yes, half a ply. And I didn't look any further just because I was pissed off that from this position I didn't see knight. What didn't I? I don't even. I didn't see rook takes c5 from here, and therefore when I got to the position after deciding this was good and seeing it here, I was like, oh, I'm just an idiot. I might as well, I guess I'm just worse. And it's like, just think for a second. Just stop. Just stop and just try to not be so fucking weird about everything. But I was just like, oh, rook takes c5 and I'm an idiot. And then I just stopped looking. Because I was like, well, this sucks. And I'm right. But like, just one move, half a move. Anyways, so that's how I lost to the 12-year-old, but she was very nice and she was very happy, so we did a post-mortem, because I was like, I need to be a good sport, and if I have to lose to someone, I would rather that it's her, because she's a good guy, but, you know what I mean? Chat, make a kid happy, that's a win in my book. Yeah, like, I would rather make a kid cry, but right after that, making a kid happy is, like, they're pretty close with, like, the amount of enjoyment I get out of it.